Hi, I'm Michelle Segrest, and welcome to the Factory of the Future podcast.
This podcast is inspired by my 3-volume book series on the evolution of modern manufacturing. Each episode features engaging conversations with game-changing experts discussing the processes and innovations that are changing the landscape of modern manufacturing. Thank you so much for listening. Please do me a favor and leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes and take just a couple of seconds to leave a review. And then go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss a single episode. Today, I am very happy to welcome Heinrich Louw as my expert guest. Rick is the Director and Senior Marketing Strategist for Lasso Consulting. He is a longtime industry colleague and friend, and we have collaborated on many high-profile projects. Most recently, we got together and combined resources and skills to co-write the book, How to Creatively Market a Technical Product. This book is available on Amazon and in the Apple Bookstore, among other places that you can buy books. And there's a link in the show notes, and if you stick around to the end of the podcast, we will offer you a very special deal that's just for the people who listen to the podcast. I'm so excited to have Rick here today because we have a really interesting topic to discuss. We want to find out how today's technical marketers are adapting to the ever-changing evolutions of modern manufacturing. When you think of marketing a technical product, data sheets and operational manuals are no longer enough to get the job done. Trade shows are expensive and time-consuming, and there is no way to accurately track the success of traditional print ads. Direct mail marketing, due to stricter personal data laws and regulations, is obsolete. In today's ever-evolving digital age, old-school marketing is not enough to get your technical product noticed in an extremely saturated, competitive landscape. Now, we acknowledge that the fundamentals of product marketing include the ability to frame a strong and unique value proposition with proof points, to understand the personas and target groups for whom to develop messages, channels, and deliverables, and to have a content marketing strategy which is underpinned by key narratives. Our book partly covers these concepts, but it is much more tactical, drawing on some relevant industry case studies and examples. As manufacturing continues to evolve, so does technical product marketing. It's important to embrace new media and find just the right balance with an omnichannel approach. It's also a good idea to embrace a powerful content marketing strategy. Technical product marketers are learning how to combine various forms of creative media to strike just that right balance to bring a message to your audience that will generate leads and build profits. Now, Rick and I together have 30 plus years of combined marketing experience, helping industrial customers market their technical products in thoughtful, creative, effective ways. In our book, we demonstrate how to avoid jumping on the marketing bandwagon and instead show you how to uncover your target audience and discover exactly what resonates with them. A copy and paste approach rarely works in today's vast competitive landscape. And in this podcast, Rick is going to demonstrate how to create a custom omni-channel approach that will make your target audience pay attention to your technical product. So before we get started, I just want to share with you why Rick is an expert on this topic. He has an extensive background of experience. For nearly 2 decades, he has utilized his talent for developing key marketing strategies for high-profile companies in a variety of industries. For the past 18 years, his passion for marketing within the engineering, industrial, and manufacturing sectors has been fueled by opportunities to drive creative, game-changing campaigns that made an impactful difference for his clients all over the world, in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, New Zealand, and Australia. His career in marketing technology and technical products started in 2002 when he was part of the First National Bank of South Africa team responsible for developing and rolling out the country's first mobile banking app. In 2006, he relocated to New Zealand and was contracted to restructure and streamline the New Zealand marketing function for GHD. Rick also worked with the Trans-Tasman marketing team at Vita, providing strategic guidance in terms of developing, refining, and commercializing some of the company's online and peer-to-peer B2B technical and business solutions. In 2010, he relocated back to South Africa to take on the role of Regional Marketing Communications Manager for the Middle East and Africa for Xylem. And this is where we met and began working together. In this role, he worked closely with the international product manager teams in terms of product commercialization aspects and was responsible for localization of route to market strategies and marketing content. Rick moved to the UK in 2016 and began working as the marketing communications leader of fire suppression products at Johnson Controls. In July of 2018, Rick founded Lasso Consulting, an independent marketing consultancy which helps industrial and manufacturing businesses engage with the right target market, develop captivating marketing strategies, and create actionable and measurable marketing plans. As you can see, Rick is very qualified to discuss how technical product marketing is evolving along with today's manufacturing landscape. I learn something from him every time I talk to him. So now you're going to get a chance to learn from him. And without any further delay, I want to welcome Rick to the podcast so we can dive into this discussion. So thanks for being here, Rick. Welcome.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks for that very thorough introduction.
Well, you have such a long and storied career. We have to go through and mention that. And you're definitely an expert on this topic, so I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. It's fantastic to have you here. Now, before we dive into this discussion about technical product marketing, I'm just really curious to know what your manufacturing clients are talking about these days with regard to current and future manufacturing trends. What are you hearing out there?
Obviously, everybody knows that we're living in interesting times with the COVID pandemic, and I think that has influenced the way we do business, particularly when it comes to engineering and manufacturing companies in a very big way. And a lot of companies had to adapt really quickly in terms of their processes and workflow and so forth. The clients that I've been working with during the pandemic were luckily both considered essential product and service providers. So from an operational perspective, it was business as usual for them, albeit with the required social distancing and other COVID rules in place. The two aspects that are negatively impacted, though, by COVID, I found, were marketing and business development. And I can also add to that product training to an extent. And this is due to the fact that face-to-face interaction has been ruled out. So no longer could these companies rely on client visits. As you mentioned previously, trade shows, which normally form a big platform for these companies, ceased to exist. So they couldn't go to trade shows anymore and interact with potential clients. And these sort of face-to-face interaction is required, particularly when you look at the European area. It's a very vast region to cover, and they had to find other ways to do business. The one client in particular relied very heavily on Europe-wide face-to-face training for its resellers and also installers. And with new product launches looming and kicking off at the beginning of the pandemic, they had to do other things to try and get that training out to their channels. So the product training and channel partner enablement obviously was a key focus for them, and the client had to come up very quickly with an alternative way to do their customer training. And they had to do a bit of innovation, and an online training portal and training content literally had to be developed in a very short space of time. In fact, we had 10 days to start pulling together the first set of presentations. And this also had to be done in several European languages. Obviously, localization for native tongue is important, particularly when it comes to training requirement. And it's a legal requirement in many countries that this is done in a native tongue.
That's a really interesting point because I don't mean to interrupt you, but here in the U.S., we don't have to worry about that as much. Even though we're doing global business, we kind of rely on everyone to speak English, and it's pretty lazy of us. But I know that in Europe, it's not the case. You have to adapt to the languages of the different markets that you serve.
Yep.
That puts an extra layer of challenge, even during this challenging time.
Indeed. Yeah, it does indeed. And we were fortunate that because the salespeople were not going out on client visits, they were there to back us up, and the sales teams helped with the translation of a lot of the training material, be it a PowerPoint or a previous webinar or previous online digital training asset. So we managed to do it. We worked obviously long hours and turned it around really quickly. We obviously launched with the English versions first to get that out, and then followed with the other languages. Obviously, we had to promote all these training courses also really very quickly. And this was predominantly done through email campaigns. And I need to add the caveat here. There was obviously GDPR compliant email campaigns. So we emailed the existing client bases, but also relied very heavily on LinkedIn and other digital channels. This particular company was lucky in the sense that their social media channels were well established with large numbers of followers, and they could get their messages out really quickly. Other companies are not that lucky, and that's probably a point we'll get to later why it is so important to invest in your social media channels, because if you need to get a message out there to your market or audience quickly, they are there.
Yeah, that seems to be the avenue right now, is to be connected on social media and have that following. You always have to be working on that following. We talk about that a lot in the book too.
So I don't have the figures at hand, but since the pandemic, the growth in LinkedIn and new people joining LinkedIn has been absolutely phenomenal.
Oh,
And
I can
I can
imagine.
understand why that is, because that is the preferred business to business platform now, and it is growing at a massive rate, and will continue to do so. I think a lot of people were late adopters in terms of using LinkedIn as a platform for networking and lead generation. But during the pandemic, people had to find other ways.
That's right.
Find business.
Adaptability became the name of the game, don't you
Absolutely.
think?
So, and with that comes the training. A lot of sales guys and business development people in this particular company weren't au fait with LinkedIn. So it was basically just doing short training sessions on really how to optimally use the platform, how to share content, how to comment, how to like certain posts and so forth, in order to create a viral effect and to get the content out there to a much wider audience. Another client I'm working with was unfortunately not that lucky, in the sense that their social media channels and other digital platforms were not really looked after and not really developed to the extent that it should have been. And they relied very heavily on a face-to-face model of business development managers doing cold calling and then going out to see clients. And as you know, during the pandemic, that absolutely was not allowed under any circumstances. And it's much harder to do a sale of a technical product over a phone than sitting in front of a customer where you can demonstrate how the product works using your laptop or an iPad or an app. So I think it was a bit of a strain on the sales and the business development teams to firstly find new clients, and then how do they communicate product information to those clients. The other thing is they also had a poorly performing website. So from an SEO perspective, they were not doing great. So even if someone did do a search for a particular product or service, they did not rank. So they couldn't even rely on their website to generate some leads for them. And a lot of investment had to be done in terms of the website to get that up to standard. The other thing is they didn't have an internal marketing resource. I know in today's day and age, that's almost unheard of. And because of that, there's no real focus on the marketing side of things and how everything is interwoven and integrated, and how do you create a consistent message across various platforms.
Rick, in our book, we talk so much about being prepared with social media channels and being prepared with different creative solutions for marketing. And we actually wrote this before the pandemic really came into full bloom, but that it's still relevant because, especially with the pandemic, I think it's taught us that those things are necessary even more so to be prepared, to always be working on your social media following, to always be reaching out to new customers, to always be looking for creative ways to promote your products. Don't you think that's just amplified the need that we describe?
Absolutely. And I think this ties up with the original part of the question around key trends.
Yeah.
Speaking to peers in the industry and just keeping an eye out on general media, there were some key trends, not just with my own clients, but like I said, in general. It's no longer an option to have an online presence. It is an absolute necessity. During this period since February, March last year, the investment in number of videos or animations being produced, companies trying out podcasting and new things, just it's gone through the ceiling. People are investing heavily in their websites and very specifically in the user experience, because you can have a really good website, but if the user experience or the customer journey is not really clearly defined on that website, you can lose your customer.
That's something you do with Lasso Consulting, right? Don't you go and look at a website and say, hey, this is not great for the user. Here's some things that you can do to make it better?
Yeah. So I've got associates that I work with. I'm not personally an SEO or user experience expert, but I will work with very knowledgeable people in the industry that will go and do a health check on someone's website so they can look at how the website ranks, what search terms they're optimizing for, and what is the general user experience. So from the minute you land on the website, what do you see? Are there prompts to engage with certain bits and pieces of the website? Are there calls to action? So it's both a design aspect and also what you want the person to do once they're on your website.
It's one thing to meet somebody face to face at a trade show, which we have done for so many decades now. That's been our main source. And when you have somebody in your booth and you're looking at them face to face, you can show them the product. You can walk them through the booth. You can introduce them to your company and explain what you do and how you can help them. Now that's being replaced by this website. So the website, you send them to the website to hopefully give them those exact same messages. So that makes it even more important because we don't have that face to face.
Absolutely. Gone are the days of just having what we call a brochure type website. It's got to be interactive.
Yeah. That's such a great point.
Yeah. And I think for me, that is key, is what is going to keep me on someone's website. It needs to engage me. It needs to tell me to do things. Click here, watch this video, download this, or like this, or share this. Part of the website is also getting your potential customers or even existing customers to share their experience of your website, and they might just find something that's really of interest and they want to get that out there. So I think going forward, a lot of companies will relook their websites and what it is doing, and has it really been designed from a strategic point of view, in the sense that it's got to drive leads into your funnels.
Right. And also the website has kind of become a virtual trade show in some way. It's like your virtual trade show booth. You want to make sure you get all those visuals and key connections that you would normally make at a trade show. That has to all come through this website portal.
Absolutely. If I look at some of the statistics for the one company I'm dealing with on Google Analytics, they have an exceptionally high bounce rate. And that tells me that there's nothing of interest that's keeping people on the website. So if they had more things like animations or video clips, the people would spend a lot more time and also demonstrate the products better. There's no sense in having just static images. If you're selling a really cool technical product, you should have videos and animations and anything else possible to promote that product and its features and benefits.
And don't you need a mixture of all those things, a balance of all those things? Because different people absorb content in different ways. Some people are very visual learners and they want to see how the product works in a video, and other people want to read about it. So you have to have blogs and very detailed blogs and also stat sheets and things like that on there as well. But then to have like a how-to video or something like that also can enhance that user experience.
Absolutely. And I think you're kind of alluding to the fact that you also need some customer testimonials and some sort of customer advocacy thing on your
Oh,
website.
sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the case study, be it a written case study or whether it's a video case study, has become so important because technical products, let's face it, are probably not that cheap to buy. I think potential buyers would want to know how that particular product has solved problems and issues for other customers. So the case study, and I can never stress this enough with my clients, is absolutely key as part of your marketing stroke content marketing strategy.
Well,
Because
I agree
people,
with that 100%. How your product solves problems, if you can explain that to the audience, that's gold.
yeah. So I think looking back at what we just talked about, having product videos and so forth combined with how someone else has experienced the product is a really good mix in terms of getting those messages across. Companies should really more carefully look at their strategies around that and prioritize it. I'm currently dealing with a company where they're really struggling to get their case studies off the ground. And it's purely because they don't have a focus and there's no one that's really driving that from an internal perspective. So
Right.
sometimes they need to engage with someone outside of the business to take a step back and say, okay, this is what you need to do and develop these sort of bits and pieces. You only need to do the first two case studies to get the buy-in, and then from there the ball will be set in motion, and hopefully more people within the business will contribute case studies. And which customer doesn't like to see their name up in lights?
That's right. That's absolutely right.
That's if
That's
they give
such a
you the
good point.
permission, of course, but it's also a
Yes,
way for them to promote their business.
that's right. It helps. It's a win-win for everyone. Well, what are some of the other trends you're seeing out there?
I touched on this. So there's also independent trade shows. When I was working with Johnson Controls, a lot of their business was generated via trade shows, and obviously these got cancelled and replaced by virtual online trade shows. It's nothing close to the real thing, but you could literally log into the trade show and walk around and that virtual booth, and then you could visit an exhibitor's booth and they could have in that booth videos that you could then click on or infographics, whatever the case may be. I think the virtual trade show is here to stay, particularly because if you look at the carbon footprint from having a normal trade show, it's
Hmm.
massive. People traveling, I think, will be anti-mass gatherings for a while to come. And which better way to reach a global audience by having a virtual trade show? Because then people that can't travel for whatever reason can go to your virtual show. And maybe they run these virtual trade shows in tandem with the real events when they start off again.
I mean, this is where some really innovative technologies are coming into play, like augmented reality and virtual reality, where you could literally go inside a booth from your computer and take a look around and see a product in motion. I think goes along with that trend of these virtual trade shows. They're having to embrace some really forward-thinking technologies.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be paramount to invest in those sort of technologies because once you've done the investment, you've got that at your disposal. You don't have to run around at the last minute to try and get things together for a trade show. So once you've developed those augmented reality and virtual reality or whichever digital assets, they are there and you can plug and play them as you wish. It's almost developing a library of those sort of tools that you can then customize for an event, whether it's an online training or seminar or webinar, or whether it's a virtual trade show.
You're absolutely right. That's key moving forward, particularly within the next, I would say, I don't know when we'll be back to live trade shows. I would say it'd be at least a year, if not longer, don't you think?
I agree. I think it will be probably different for different regions, but I don't foresee live trade shows happening in the near future. Probably not this year. It's difficult to say because we are guided by obviously the infection rates and the rate at
Right.
which vaccines are rolled out. So it's really difficult to gaze into that crystal ball and make a prediction to
Right.
say when it's going to
Exactly.
happen. But I think we can err on the side of probably not going to be this year. I think a lot of companies have already decided they're just going to move all their events to 2022 rather than trying to even attempt to do something this year.
That's right. It makes sense that it would be at least that long. Now, I know you talked a little bit about the growth of LinkedIn for the B2B market, especially since COVID and these extraordinary times that we're living. And I know that's a trend right now. Is there anything else, any other trends you want to mention?
From the few companies I've dealt with, let's say over the last 2 years, I've definitely seen an increase in investment in terms of digital marketing and content generation. Again, there's quite a few slow adopters in terms of content marketing. It's one of those things that once you get into it, it becomes like brushing your teeth.
Yeah. Yeah. It just becomes natural, right?
Yeah. You get up and do it, and every day you should be writing a case study or develop some sort of content that can go on your website.
And what's interesting there is that content comes in lots of different shapes and sizes. Content doesn't have to be, an Academy Award winning video. It can be a small snippet. It can be a social media post. It can be a slideshow. It can be just an image that you talk about. So developing content, I think, scares people sometimes. And they don't realize that content is not 3,000 word white papers. There's lots of different kinds of content that are really easy to generate. And then there's more difficult pieces of content that, of course, are also important.
Absolutely. I think repurposing of content should be a key strategy as well. So
Yeah, it has to be. Yeah, it has to be, especially based on the fact what we said earlier about how different people consume information in different ways.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably get to this at a later point. It all ties in with, which is really a marketing buzzword called the omnichannel approach.
It's a buzzword, but we talk about it in depth in the book. Why don't you explain exactly what that is for those listeners who don't know?
So there's multi-channel and there's omnichannels. Multi-channel is when you use various different platforms or channels to promote your product. So it could be through a reseller network or distributor network. It could be through digital media or online media. It could be through email marketing. It could be through trade shows. So different channels that promote the business or the product. The difference between multi-channel and omnichannel is still a multimedia approach, but there's a consistent message in your channel. So you make sure that irrespective of the channel you're using for promoting a particular product, the message is consistent. So if someone engages with posts on LinkedIn or whether they follow you on Twitter, the message should be exactly the same. And I think that's the key differential. All omni-channel approaches will be multimedia, but not all multimedia will be omni-channel, if you know what I mean. So
I see. So it's all about consistency. It's about consistency of message.
Absolutely. So understanding, first of all, your audience, which media they follow or consume or where they find the information. Like I said, regardless of where they find the information, the message should be consistent. The content that you share should be consistent. Otherwise, you just lose that customer. And something as simple as making sure that your website is optimized for smart devices. Yeah. I've had an instance where I went into the client's website on my phone and I was surprised to see that it wasn't optimized for use on a phone. You had to scroll and flick left and right to try and get all the content. Something as simple as that is really key.
Well, you can lose a customer very quickly.
Absolutely.
If they have a bad user experience. If it's too difficult for them to navigate through the content, they're going to leave and go somewhere else, right? Pretty quickly.
And that ties in again with the point I made earlier. From a user experience, it should be consistent and really well thought through. What is the customer journey as well? If I only use my phone, I do most of my web surfing on my phone. Mm-hmm. And if I land on a website that's just not optimized for my device, I leave immediately. It's something that a lot of companies don't think through. And whether it's a lack of resource or not knowing, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's definitely something that needs to enjoy a lot more attention.
I think that's interesting. And I can just tell you from experience that I always look at the stats of the traffic on my website, and more people visit my website, which is very content heavy. They visit my website through their mobile phone. And I used to be really concerned with how the website looks, like the design of it on the laptop or on the desktop. And now I don't worry about that so much because so few people are looking at my website that way. They're almost all on their phone. So now I really focus on the phone design and the user experience through the mobile app because so few people are looking at it the other way. And I think it's important to know that. If you're promoting your website and your products through your website, you need to know what's the behavior of your audience. Are they more mobile phone users or desktop users?
Absolutely. I think it's safe to say that most people nowadays are more inclined to browse using their phones or an iPad. It's generally when people have some time to kill waiting in an airport or waiting before a meeting or whatever the case may be, pull out the phone or iPad and flick through.
Yeah, that's so true. And is it also true that does the omni-channel approach also apply to branding? Like, how important is it to make sure that your branding message is consistent throughout all channels? That's probably a stupid question, but I think something we should probably address.
I think it's absolutely essential that the way you reflect your brand is consistent right throughout every single channel that you use. Brand, you can always basically refer to as a personality.
Mm-hmm.
So it means the personality needs to be consistent across all the touch points. And again, that takes some effort from a design perspective and should be done from the get-go when you do your website and when you design collateral. And normally your brand should be guided by a comprehensive brand manual. How should it be portrayed on various platforms, in print, ads, on web, and so forth? It's a non-negotiable in my view.
Right. When a user clicks on your LinkedIn channel, for example, they should know that that's where they are. They need to know that when they go to the Twitter or the LinkedIn or the Facebook or the website, that they're in the right place. And the way to do that is with branding, with colors, with logos, with images that all work together and reflect your brand.
Absolutely, yes.
Rick, let's talk a little bit about how manufacturers today are having to embrace new media. There are a lot of traditional marketing techniques that are still being used, but most of that is shifting to this more digital and forward-thinking idea of marketing. Can you talk a little bit about that, the shift that's happening?
For sure. So I think when we talk about old media or traditional marketing media, we generally refer to mass media such as radio, TV, and print. Most relevant to manufacturing and engineering industry would probably have been print media. And from my years of experience, these sort of companies always had tons of brochures and leaflets and so forth, and folders to put the leaflets in, only to be set in the cupboard and not get distributed. So it's printed in mass and it doesn't necessarily go anywhere. The other thing is it becomes obsolete really quickly. So when you have a product spec change, those leaflets or brochures automatically become redundant.
You just throw them in the trash. They're just not good anymore.
So the mass media approach is still relevant for probably business to consumer. So TV still has relevancy, radio still has relevancy, and print media to an extent, but less so, I would say, for the manufacturing and B2B base. I think things like industry journals and industry-specific publications will still be around. They actually now also have online versions, many of them, so you can decide whether you want to get your hard copy of a journal or a publication,
right,
or whether you want to go to the website and subscribe and get your information downloaded. I think most of the publications will start moving into an online format because that's where most people seem to be getting the information and, like we said earlier, engage with medias when they have spare time and they can quickly have a flick through their phone.
So there's so much value to using an online journal rather than a printed journal because you can click links. You can actually click things where a video will pop up on the screen. The advertisements are more interactive and virtually stimulating. They're just so interactive, and that's just something you cannot get with a print magazine.
Absolutely. I think that ties in with the fact that social media is growing at such a rapid rate, you want to be able to share that information. So if you do read a journal and you see something that's of interest or that you think other people might like, it's so much easier to share that via your own networks and create that viral effect. And I think that's what business owners want, is obviously for knowledge about their products to be spread far and wide.
Yes, I agree completely. Let's talk a little bit about this evolution of media. We just touched on it a little bit, but let's get into more specifics. What are some of the advancements and changes that you've seen in recent years with regard to media?
Well, the first one I think is probably more a general one, not just relating to the manufacturing and industrial sector. I think to any consumer really, is the fact that we've moved from being a passive media consumer, sitting in front of the TV, having TV ads thrown at us on a frequent basis. We've moved away as that type of consumer to someone that's more active and
Right, sure.
selective. We seek out content and exploring and navigating lots of other different information spaces. I mean, I follow several companies on various platforms because that's where I can get access to their latest product updates, whatever the case may be, really quickly, rather than sitting and waiting for a print ad to appear in a magazine that I might possibly be reading. So we've evolved from passive to also actively creating content and using content. So the roles have slightly changed. And again, it's a lot harder to share a TV ad than what it is
Sure.
to share,
Yeah.
unless it's on YouTube, obviously. But I think our roles as creators and users is evolving at a rapid pace. And just building our own networks through that way as well.
Well, sharing this information is the best way to multiply the audience.
Absolutely. And that's what you want, is try and get your message
Sure.
out to as wide an audience as possible.
You want to find those people that you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise.
Become our own content producers. I mean, you just have to look at things like TikTok, Instagram, and all the others. We've moved from a passive media consumer to creating our own content as well. So the roles have definitely shifted. So that was the first one. We touched on this one. The second one is really the shift from monomedia to multimedia and omnichannel. So monomedia will typically be, like I said, TV, radio. It's a message coming at you. You've got no control over it. It's an ad that's placed on a regular basis in a magazine. So that's become quite dull and boring in many ways. I'm not saying it doesn't have its place as part of an integrated campaign, but monomedia, just using one channel or one media, is gone. You need to look at, like I said, multimedia, and ideally your messaging should be consistent and integrated across all the channels, making it omnichannel. And that's been a major shift and quite a big shift in the manufacturing and engineering industry in recent years. I think the other trend is we've moved away from what we call periodicity to real time and on demand. So periodicity is really when you have an ad appearing in a magazine once a month. So there's a regular frequency. There's less of that. People are becoming immune to that sort of exposure in terms of media. And it's an old school sort of unidirectional type approach, which doesn't really work very effectively. In today's time, it's all about being relevant and being in real time. Relevant in the sense that, are you generating content or marketing content or whatever the case is that appeal to your market? And how do you share that in real time? So are you active on social media channels? And can you get that content out really quickly to your followers?
Yeah, that's so important because it becomes old really fast these days.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. You wanna get as much out there that's relevant in a short space of time. I think a fourth one is probably around the need for access and interaction. Because of the very strong interactive nature of the new marketing environment that we live in, which is the digital marketing environment, there had to be a shift from previously dominating one to many unilateral communications. Now, I sort of touched on this in the previous point, to bilateral many to many type communications. which is traditionally your digital media that we engage with in today's time.
I think interaction is so important because don't you find yourself, no matter what, you see an image, you try to touch it. Like you touch it on your phone, you want it to go somewhere.
Correct.
And if it doesn't go somewhere or do something, you keep hitting it. You think something's wrong with it because it's not doing anything. You need to make sure that all your elements are interactive in some way, whether a piece of information pops up or a video pops up or call to action, anything you touch. And I find myself touching my laptop screen sometimes because I'm so used to touching things that I realize, oh, I have to click that. I can't touch it. But I think this is a touch world that we're living in. People want that interaction.
Absolutely. I mean, you just have to watch some toddlers when they've got an iPad or
that's right.
someone's phone in their
so
hand.
True.
They can probably navigate those devices much better than some adults can. And
that's right.
That is the generation that will be the future buyers, industrial buyers. So if you don't adopt the interactive technologies today, you're going to find it very difficult in a couple of years from now.
So true. That's such an interesting image to think about. These toddlers that are touching these screens are the future buyers. Wow, that's profound. Something to think about.
Another one was we've moved away from time-based to more of a spatial approach. So time-based, again, it's a very sort of linear, temporal marketing approach to media. Spatial is more about where are you active, which platforms, which networks, whether it's digital or whether it's portals or other web-based platforms. It's more about the space that you're in rather than when you receive information. It's really finding platforms that are immersive. Mm-hmm. And people go to these platforms because that's where they can engage, like we said earlier. They go to get educated, to learn, to gather, and also obviously to share information. I think the last one is probably we've moved from data to knowledge. So new media or digital media brings with it, as you can imagine, abundance of information and data. The challenge really lies in analyzing this data and turning that into knowledge. And it's the latter that becomes the axis of marketing strategy refinement, because you need to, whatever it is that you want to communicate in a very digestible format. And this is particularly relevant in technical product marketing. Not everybody understands the highly technical aspects of a product or the features and benefits. So it is fine-tuning that content and messaging that it is digestible for multiple audiences.
That's a really good point. And sometimes there's a fine line between you don't want to dumb it down too much because you know that the audience is pretty intelligent. I mean, these are engineers and these are highly educated people who are using these products. So you don't want to dumb it down too much, but you also want to appeal to the layman,
yep.
Maybe to someone who is going to make a recommendation to someone else about the product. They need to understand it as well. So you have to kind of balance the complicated with the simple explanations.
Correct. It's not always an engineer that makes the buying decision. It could be someone in procurement, and someone in procurement.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, of course.
Will probably not understand all the highly fluted technical jargon of a product. They need it in a different format. And I think that's why, and we alluded to this and mentioned this earlier, is case studies. What has it done for other similar buyers? Because it makes it relatable to that audience.
That's right. If it can solve a problem, it reaches a lot more people because they can see, hey, I have this problem too, so maybe I need this product as well. And that's very effective. And that, this is a good segue. I wanted to talk about this importance of identifying the audience. We talk a lot in the book about creating a customer avatar. So can you tell our listeners why this is so important, why it's so critical to uncover who and where your audiences are and to understand what resonates with them?
Yes, moved away from the mass media one-size-fits-all approach to marketing and communications. That's why it is more and more relevant for you to understand exactly who your buyer is. We call them buyer personas, or like you said, avatar. So understanding where those personas get their information from, where they look for information when they want to make a purchase decision or look for a specific product is really quite key. Do they read journals? Do they follow social media? Are they on specific industry portals, for example, or do they join groups on LinkedIn? So where is it that they engage? Because this is where they're going to consume most of their marketing content and find information that's relevant to their purchase decision. No two audience members will be the same. Some people might want to get the information via Twitter because it's bite-sized information, but others go to industry journals to get their information. So it's key to understand where people find the information so that you can ensure that you provide your information via those channels as well. And obviously, it's got to suit your audience segments.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Again, this takes time to develop the understanding of your personas or avatars, like you call them. And this is quite often done by having focus groups with existing customers. And it's asking them, which media do you read? Where do you look for information? Which trade shows do you go to? It's understanding the relevancy of different channels for your audiences to ensure that you can capture as many of them across various platforms.
Yeah, that's really great advice and so critical to the marketing effort. And as we've learned through the years, marketing is a process and it can be complicated, it can be simple. But one of the things that your company, Lasso Consulting, does so expertly is you create this marketing audit for your clients. Can you just briefly walk us through this 4-step marketing process that you have?
Yeah, so the first step really is doing a marketing audit. That really is doing a bit of a deep dive in terms of what the client has already in terms of things like marketing collateral. Do they have a strategy to start off with? What is their strategy? Who are their markets and their segments? What is their current messaging? So it's really just developing a bit more of an in-depth analysis around the company, its customers, what they do, which markets they serve, and what's happening in the bigger environment out there. So what's happening in the macro environment that might have an impact on the business? What are the competitors doing? So yeah, we've got this acronym in marketing called a SWOT analysis. So it's very similar to a SWOT analysis, is looking at what are the factors that will influence this particular company and its products. A lot of time needs to spend on doing that audit because that will allow you to identify gaps that might exist. And it's based on the gaps and what you found in the general audit that then dictates what the strategy should be. And then normally that will be translated into a marketing plan of some sorts. And that's really up to the customer whether they want a 3-month plan or a 6-month or a 12-month. It also depends on whether the strategy is for a product launch or whether it's a branding strategy. And that really varies from company to company and product to product. I think the emphasis here is to have a plan to work to, because if you don't, then things will just not happen. And at the end of the day, you want to see a return on your marketing spend. So it's quite key that you stick to that plan and make sure you've got one in place.
Of course. You have to trust the process.
Yeah, and it is a process to go through. And if you don't, then you might as well not do it at all. And you've got to do the plan because without a plan, you can't go into the next step, which is the rollout. So within each plan, you'll have several marketing actions. And the rollout will take care of that. So you've got to have a clearly defined calendar of when things will be happening in terms of your marketing actions. And basically a tick list. So once you've done your actions for a month, you can go, yes, tick, I've done that. What is the next action in line? And the ultimate thing is, and this is the last step, is really measuring the impact that your strategy or campaign had. Because you spend money on a lot of these marketing actions. And you want to see whether it's driven any traffic to your website, for example, whether there's been any leads generated or leads converted. Yeah, at the end of the day, you want to return on the marketing spend and make sure that you at least get customers. So
it's probably important in the beginning to identify how are we going to measure success? How do we know if this was successful?
Absolutely. I think for most companies, it will be new business, new leads or new customers. It's very important to clearly upfront state how many new customers you want to get in a particular time or types of customers. What is considered a lead, because you can get a marketing qualified lead and you can get a sales qualified lead. Marketing qualified lead is someone that potentially clicked on something on the website or filled out a form or downloaded something. Doesn't mean that is an opportunity in terms of sales yet. So it's also clearly defining how many sales leads that you want to end up at the end of the day. That's really only effectively monitored and measured if you have a CRM system. We've not spoken about this a lot, but it's funneling those customers to come up with the few essential leads that will give you business rather than just extra followers, whatever the case may be.
As we talk, Rick, about the future of manufacturing, do you think most companies are effectively preparing for the future?
I can't really comment on the industries that I've been involved in. I think the answer is yes. In the past, manufacturers used diversification as a growth strategy. However, I think moving forward, there's definitely a push to go back to basics and keep business as tight and lean as possible. And I think that's so relevant under current circumstances, is really relook your business. And I know of companies that have started selling off parts of their businesses that were not really part of their core business. So it's focusing on core business, what makes you money, and get rid of the rest that doesn't work. Something else that ties in with that is digitization and agility. So most of the companies I've engaged with have these as priorities. There's a lot of pressure on manufacturers to keep up with what we know as the fourth industrial revolution. Like I said, with so much uncertainty and risks in terms of the global state of the economy and what we've just been through, manufacturers are turning to something that they can control, which is technological advancements. And that goes for marketing as well, the marketing side of things. So investing in digitalization of their marketing. So the last point, I do think more companies are investing in voice of the customer, or VOC as it's known. So actively engaging with customers in order to see how they can better innovate and develop new products. I think this is really paramount for going forward. And some of the companies I've worked with does do a lot of this. And it should be done on a regular basis. Be driven by your customer. Customer centricity is not a new term, but listening to the customers, what will solve their problems, and like I said, that will drive innovation going forward.
Yes, that's paramount.
And it will also solidify partnerships with your channel partners or your customers, whichever business model you use, because they feel part of the process. And obviously, that's the way you want to entrench customers.
Fantastic. Really good insight. This has really been a fun conversation. I know we need to wrap it up. We're getting toward the end of the time, and we could talk all day about the future of technical product marketing, because you and I did actually literally write the book on it. And a lot can be found in our book, and we're going to tell the listeners about a special deal in just a minute. But first, I just want to thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge and expertise. And I want to give you a chance to give us the last word. What else do you want to say about the future of manufacturing, and in particular, the future of technical product marketing?
The whole COVID pandemic has definitely made many companies rethink how they market their products. And we spoke about this at length earlier on. It's also my gut feel that traditional platforms such as trade shows will probably take another shape or form. So we need to look at new ways, and innovation will be applied to marketing as well. The podcast that you and I are doing now, many companies have never done this before, and was something that was prompted by the pandemic, and look at new ways that you can reach your customers. I think the same thing, a lot of manufacturers like to do facility tours or factory tours to demonstrate their capabilities to potential customers. Why can't this not be virtual? Having videos of the facility is so much easier to do than having a lot of people coming to the factory or the manufacturing plant. So I think video and animation and time-lapse videos is something that will just gain popularity. I think it's a lot easier to share that sort of content with a much wider audience than just having a few people walking through the factory. And then I think last but not least, in general, social media and other digital platforms will continue to grow like LinkedIn has since the pandemic. I think that growth will just be sustained. And we saw with one company that I worked with that they had almost a 300% growth in followers of their LinkedIn page in the last 6 months, which is really good. So yeah, we'll see a lot more growth along those lines in terms of digital platforms.
All great points and really a good way to wrap up this great conversation that we've had. I want to thank you again so much for being here. And before we say goodbye to the listeners, I just want to take this opportunity to tell the listeners a little bit about your company, about Lasso Consulting. Small or mid-sized businesses in the industrial sector who want more profitable business leads often face 3 challenges: engaging with the right target market, developing captivating marketing strategies, and creating actionable, measurable marketing plans. Lasso Consulting has proven experience and expertise to help you meet and exceed all of these things. So whether your company is rebranding or developing specific route to market strategies for products or services, Lasso facilitates the development and rollout of your marketing process. So check them out at www.lasso.consulting. And I have a link in the show notes for you. So all you have to do is click it and you'll go right there. And as promised, we have a special deal for you. Listeners of this podcast can download the interactive PDF version of our book, How to Creatively Market a Technical Product, with a 25% discount off the already affordable price of only $9.99 by following the link in the show notes and using the discount code podcast25. This brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for listening. Please do me a favor and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. If you have interesting information to share and want to contact me about being a guest on a future episode of this podcast, please send me an email at michelle@navigatecontent.com. You can also send me questions that I will have my expert guests answer for you on a future episode. And in the meantime, please check out my book series on modern manufacturing to read more than 30 real-world case studies about how global companies are using smart technology and innovation to build the factory of the future. All the links to the books and articles mentioned in this podcast are in the show notes. Have a great week, and please join me for the next episode of Factory of the Future.